The Norwegian celebrity Nils Vogt looks like George W. Bush, which is the earlier president of the United States of America. The hair of Nils Vogt turned white when he got older, just like the hair color of my biological grandfather on my father's side, and some of his biological brothers. Nils and George have some of the same face shape, the same nose, and the same eye color. Nils Vogt plays the character Carl in Mot I brøstet, and that is connecting him to my biological father's side, because my biological father has the name Carl Fredrik. And the below generations might name themselves based on the above generations. Nils and George does not look like the biological family of my biological grandmother on my father's side, which has the name Skanke. Maybe Nils and George look a little bit like the biological family of my biological grandfather on my father's side, with his name Strand. The hair of Nils Vogt turned white when he became older, and that is very typical for my biological family Strand. In addition, it is very normal for my biological family Strand and my grandfather generation to have blue eyes. I think that the official father of George W. Bush is his biological father, because they look very similar. But I do not think that the father of George W. Bush is the biological father of my biological grandfather on my father's side. That is because of their appearance. However, I think that Nils and George is part of that same generation as my biological grandfather on my father's side, due to their age. Therefore, I think that Nils and George is the biological cousins of my biological grandfather on my father's side. But since Nils Vogt seemed to be in close family with the earlier president of the United States of America, that might increase the popularity of Nils. Also, my smart and sensitive grandfather on my father's side is pretty fucking popular. So even though they are just the cousins of my biological grandfather on my father's side, that is close enough in family to become very popular. In addition, the father of George W. Bush was the biological brother of my smart and sensitive great-grandfather. Nils is 74 years of age, while George is 76 years of age. Nils Vogt looks more like George Bush than some of his official siblings. Therefore, Nils and George might be actual siblings. These are the official siblings of George Bush, which is the children of his father, George Bush. Even though the height of 179 centimeters is given for Nils and George, they seem to have different heights according to the internet. But they could have different biological mothers and that same biological father, George Bush. Nils Vogt seemed to have the height of 179 centimeters, and that height might be connected to my biological family Skanke. Therefore, he might be a Skanke Strand. However, I'm not sure which of his parents that is connecting him to which family. Therefore, the order of the last names might be different. George Bush seemed to be 182 centimeters, and that seemed to be the same height as for Joe Biden. The father of George Bush seemed to be 188 centimeters. And even though the height of 182 centimeters could be related to the height of 188 centimeters, it is probably not, because then George Bush could not be the father of George Bush. Because it is two twin heights in between 188 centimeters and 182 centimeters. And that is not possible in between father and son. Neither can two heights from that same family be divided between mother and father, because that would be incest. The height of 188 centimeters is the height of the biological mother to my biological half-brothers. George W. Bush and his father has this name Walker, which is the same name as for Alan Walker, this Norwegian celebrity. Alan Walker seemed to be 180 centimeters, and that might be the same height as for George W. Bush. So even though the internet seemed to be very agreed on the fact that George W. Bush is 182 centimeters, that might be wrong, and that height might be given because they are trying to hide something. So again, tiny little Norway is connected towards the bigger world.